Hey guys, Churchy here. So I've been playing a fair bit of Starfield. Overall, I'm having quite a good time with it. I'd probably give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10. 8's kind of my biased view. I did do a full video talking about my thoughts about the game after about 50 hours. But last night I was talking to a friend and showing him a bit of the game, and we kind of got to talking about just kind of the handcrafted versus procedural aspects of things in the game. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I'll be using the game to kind of display my points throughout. But yeah, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is that the handcrafted areas, they feel really good to explore. Like, it's a lot of fun, just kind of wandering around, encountering different characters and talking to them, and sometimes picking up a quest from them. And I will talk about that more later. But the problem with the cities, right, is that they're kind of just plonked into a very small area that's then just got the procedural stuff around it, so there's no further substance beyond the city. So, like, yeah, check this out. To start with, just like, it just looks cool. Like, the actual city itself, really, really cool. These locations, they're like just fun to wander around in and, you know, see the sights of what's going on and just explore. But then you might think, oh yeah, sweet, I wonder what's outside the city. I'm going to go and explore the surrounding area and see what I can find. But then almost immediately, right, you end up back in the kind of procedurally generated stuff. So now we can, like, come out here, right? It's like, yeah, cool, a few farm things. But almost instantly, you're back in just a procedurally generated landscape like you'd see on one of the random procedural planets. And it basically creates some problems, I think, which is part of what I want to talk about. But, like, yeah, as you can see, I'm literally like a couple of 100 meters or whatever from the city, and I'm already starting to get back out into an area that is just the same kind of procedural. Here's some rocks, here's some trees and stuff. And there's not really a lot of interesting things to go and find. And again, I'm going to talk about some of that later on as well. But this first point is basically that you kind of, you start exploring the city and it's really, really cool. And you're like, yeah, sweet, what's around it? And then you go outside the city and it's just barren. Like, it's just a barren area around the city. And that's the same across, like, the board, like the other cities as well. Like, I'll go to I'll go to New Atlantis real quick and I'll show you. It's the exact same kind of thing. And this is gonna help me bring up some other points later. But if I just go, like, New Atlantis, right?
Painful memories or not.
So here we are, we've got this great big city and you can wander around and explore all that, and there's cool spots and cool characters to find and everything. It's not really going to work too well because it's nighttime, but but basically it's the same thing again. Like, you can already kind of see it in the distance there where there's those trees and stuff. But if you get to the edge of the city, so, and I will kind of get into why I'm mentioning this so much in a minute, but I just really want to, like, demonstrate what I'm kind of talking about. But yeah, so then you get to here and you're like, as soon as you're looking across there, it's like, oh yeah, it's just trees and more rocky terrain as far as the eye can see. There looks like there's maybe a couple of things in the distance there. One of them looks to be a location. It's a structure, so it might be a farm or something. And these I'll talk about more later too, because there's issues with some of that stuff as well. I think some of them are more handcrafted better than others, but again, that's a later point. So why am I talking about this? I think Starfield was touted by Bethesda as having more handcrafted content than, like, Skyrim and stuff. It's like got the most handcrafted content they've ever done. I think Todd Howard might have said at one point. This might be true, but the problem is, it's all really, really segmented and isolated. So the point I'm making here is that, like, in Skyrim, right, and I may bring up some footage of this, but you can wander around and explore a connected world space and you can fast travel like from a very clear, easy to see map, which is another kind of point which I will briefly mention. But basically, in Skyrim, you're wandering around a connected world space. You can go from A to B, and along the way you can encounter a bunch of handcrafted dungeons and wilderness and all sorts of awesome things, right? In Starfield, you basically are in a bunch of different like micro worlds, effectively. Like they're not really, there's none of that connectivity. It's basically like you're in your little patch, the little patch of land that they've generated and then built the city on. And then to go somewhere else, you have to go through like the kind of cumbersome map UI and kind of like come out and go to another system and go to another planet or whatever and like click on the planet, and then basically you're kind of just going through a loop of like loading screens and fast traveling, and you're not actually connected to like a bigger world space. You're just in, like I said, you're in these little micro worlds, and it's like on a real, like it's a really bad scale of it. So the problem is, right, even like, yes, the cities are big. So here I am, you know, in New Atlantis, and this is a big city and it's pretty awesome, and there's like quests and stuff to go and get. But in the scale of like a universe, this is small, and it's a smaller world space than anything like Skyrim offers, and there is no massive world space to explore. It's all just like little micro worlds that you kind of go and look at. Then the other problem kind of becomes that basically when you do go beyond these places, right, you say you want to like land somewhere. Let's just do it. So I pick a random spot and I choose to land. Like, it's going to generate a world thing for me, right? But so many of the locations that you come across in the procedurally generated areas,
Oxygen,
like the points of interest and
nitrogen.
stuff, yes, they're yes, they are
Hydrogen. It's all here.
like handcrafted areas, right? But it seems to draw from a pretty small pool of them. And like, yes, the procedural stuff, it can look kind of nice sometimes, but once you get past the like momentary spectacle of it, like the like, wow, this is pretty, I'm in this environment and there's a few creatures running around and stuff, it very quickly becomes very, very repetitive, and you kind of end up finding the same areas again and again across different planets. Like, is there one close? I'll head to this thing. I'll see what we got here. So we got a structure. So basically, once that initial like, oh wow, this is cool, I'm wandering around on a planet, kind of wears off, it does really, really become just a bit mundane, because you really are like, and I think part of that is because like the pool of the handcrafted areas is so small in a way for like how big the game is and how many worlds they've got and stuff, and like, well, as in like how many they want you to wander around and explore. It's kind of crazy because you'll see like the same cave, the same structure again and again and again and again, and we might get lucky here and get something that I haven't seen. All right, but we've got a collapsed mine, so let's go into the collapsed mine and see if I've seen this area before. And it might be the area with a bunch of blue like shiny stuff. We're going to find out. Yep. I've seen this exact area about 4 or 5 times now. Yep, and it opens up into a big cave, and it's got some jumpy platforms, some loot up on the little platforms. And it's all the same layout, the same drops. Well, not the same drops, but like the same like loot spawns and stuff. Yep, here we go. We got some resources to gather. And it's just kind of like, yeah, and here you go. Even this, like, placed in the same spot. Dead miner in the same spot. So it's kind of like, yes, you're on a different world, but they're procedurally generated and stuff, but the procedural stuff isn't that deep, and then the handcrafted locations that you go to just get very, very samey and are literally the same thing, copy pasted again and again and again and again. So because the pool of possible handcrafted areas it can choose from is so small, it really makes it kind of, it's not the same joy you get from like Skyrim or something, where you like stumble across a dungeon, go into it, and it's a whole handcrafted area that's like deep and interesting. It's just the same little areas again and again. And some of them are like bigger bases and stuff, but it's still the same thing. Like you still see the same thing again and again and again. And this honestly couldn't have been a more perfect demonstration. Like I landed in a new area that I've never been to and came across something instantly that I've seen before. Like, all right, so here we are back outside that mine I was just in. And the next thing I want to talk about is basically that I think the procedural nature of a lot of the stuff has kind of impacted some of the environmental storytelling that they can do. I think one of the really cool things they really started to get good at with like Fallout 4 particularly, some of the environmental storytelling was really, really good. And there's not really a lot of that in Starfield. The most I've seen was during a companion quest with Sarah Morgan, where we went to a planet to find like a crew, or like see what happened to a crew that she was with during a battle thing that happened. But basically, that was kind of the most environmental storytelling I kind of have seen in the game so far. And I think what hampers it is that everything is so segmented and isolated. And even the handcrafted areas you go to are contained in their own little section. So you can't have like interesting, or like it's harder to have interesting links come up later. And even then, like the handcrafted areas, it's more about finding the quests and finding the random characters to talk to and that. There's not as much like finding a random piece of like information somewhere, or like a random little environmental story that just isn't actually a quest but like tells an interesting tale. Like there's way less of that. It's all very just straightforward and a clean environment with not a lot of that layer on top of it. There's just the finding NPCs and stuff. But yeah, the actual handcrafted stories and the encounters that you have, that's where the game shines, and that's what I'll kind of demonstrate now, or I'll talk about now. But basically, those handcrafted areas, and when you are exploring the handcrafted areas and finding the quests and finding the people that are giving you the quests, and when you're interacting with all of that, that is the really fun part of this game. And then in combination with that, when you when you look at all the procedural stuff as kind of like a background to that, and just use it as a background to kind of jump into a little bit here and there, that's when that stuff feels okay. Because when you kind of get lost in the game for a few hours and you're kind of like wandering around, exploring a handcrafted area, picking up some handcrafted quests, and then maybe you stop on like a world somewhere to do a bit of mining or build a little bit of an outpost, and you're just kind of doing it as an extra bit of fun, that's where it kind of becomes okay. And it's all right in those small doses, when you don't kind of engage with it too much for too long, and you just kind of don't look too deeply into what you're actually experiencing. Because when it is fitting as those little tiny breakers between all the handcrafted stuff, it's sort of okay. Like it's a nice little, it helps with like just adding a little bit of extra fun stuff to do on the side. But it's only in that specific context, because once you start like diving into it, and if you really like aim to just go and explore, it will just be really crap really quick, and as I said, get really repetitive really, really quickly. But this is the example of like where the handcrafted stuff, it can just shine, and it is really, really good. Just in terms of being that kind of Bethesda style game where you just go and do quests for people, like do missions for people, and have fun conversations with characters and stuff, and just explore great looking environments and stuff. And that's the thing, a lot of the environments are gorgeous in this game. And I mean, yeah, people think some graphics and stuff look dated, but in my opinion, it's just like, for a Bethesda game and that, this looks gorgeous. And like, even just looking at this, I think this looks gorgeous, even though I'm just in some mining facility, right? But basically last night when I was demonstrating to my friend, like, that this is the kind of where the game shines, I came in here, I walked down this, and I decided I'll go in this corridor, which I'd never been in before. So then I come in here and I'm like, oh wow, this looks cool, graffiti and posters and stuff. Again, I like these little details of the environment. It's just a shame there's not that layer of like extra environmental storytelling. But anyway, basically I came down here and you can have a couple of conversations with people. Like I ended up talking to this guy and her, and there was just a quick little bit about like basically a religious debate thing sort of. And then I came in here and I talked to her, and then she gave me a mission to go and like get her ship and see what happened to her workmate. And there was a little quest that came because of that. And then I went and I rescued this guy, right? And those aspects is where the game really shines, because it's I don't know, I say it shines a lot, but basically what I'm getting at is that those handcrafted moments, that's what Bethesda have always done really well, in my opinion. Or like, at least regardless of what the actual story is and how good the story is, all of that interaction stuff is really good. In this case, I went to a pirate ship and I ended up like persuading the pirates, or well, not pirates, sorry, they were hired mercs to retrieve a ship. Turned out she'd bought a stolen ship. The mercs have been hired to go and retrieve it. And then I persuaded the mercs to just let her have the ship and stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I rescued this guy as well. So all the little encounters like that, that's what feels really good. Again, to kind of bring it back to like, that's when the game feels freaking awesome. When you're like, oh, I'm just going to fly my ship around for a bit. Maybe I'll land on here and wander around and talk to some people. Yeah, I'll land at Cydonia on Mars. And yeah, oh, wow, now I'm on a little quest. I might go do that quest. Now I might go and mine for a little bit. And then, oh, maybe I'll go and pick up a bounty to go and shoot down a ship or something. And then, oh, now maybe I'll pick up another mission from somewhere handcrafted. Maybe I'll go and explore one of the other cities a little bit more, or like dive into some faction quests or something, which I haven't really done much of. But basically the point is, when you get into that game flow of like mixing and matching what you're doing, and kind of like, that's when I think when the game really shines, when you have the handcrafted stuff as the focus. So basically, as I was talking about then, like, the game is really good with all the handcrafted stuff, but then these problems that I've talked about is what kind of hampers it a bit, because of the segmented nature of everything, and because it's all basically like its own little micro worlds. It doesn't have that same kind of joy and feeling of exploration that you can get from something like Skyrim, and that feels kind of weird in a game that's called Starfield, right? And then I think that with the handcrafted stuff, I would have loved if there was just more of it, and more of it was more connected. Because again, if I come out here, right, and I go back out onto the surface of Mars, I don't know why it's still cycling. But when I come back out here, basically, as soon as I leave the little like handcrafted section, I'm just back into a procedurally generated like barren wasteland. And some of it makes sense for space, right? Like, don't get me wrong, some of it is fine, but you can already see over there, it's like not really anything to go find. There's something over there, which was a launchpad thing that was part of a quest thing. And then we have something over there, and we got a structure. But already I'm like at the point where I'm like, I don't even really want to bother going and exploring things, because I've seen most of them. Like, I've seen most of them multiple times. So I probably wander over there and see something I've seen before, you know? And I think like this is where I kind of wish they'd structured the game a little bit better. Or differently, I should say, because subjectively someone could enjoy this more. But because the other problem is these little micro worlds, right? Each planet is usually like, here's one settlement, and there might be a couple of little like landmarks or little factories or something you can go and look at, right? And they're kind of handcrafted, and they're slightly more unique than the procedural stuff. But again, they're very small world spaces, and they're completely disconnected from anything else. If you walk out of the bounds of it, like, perfect example here, I can go and show you this Mars mech factory, right? As soon as you walk out of the bounds of it, you're just back into that procedural stuff. So again, it's all really isolated. So here's this mech facility, and what do we got? We've got like a cool little facility that you can go down in and look at. I had a pretty cool fight with some guys in there when I did explore it. But as soon as we're back out here, it's like, yep, there's some other landmarks over here. It's another structure. What have we got? We've got another one over there. That's natural, so it'll be some strange like plant formation or something, or like rock formation. But again, you're not really that... It's just back into the procedural thing of like procedural content, like randomness between, and then a handcrafted spot that's probably going to choose from the very small pool of places you've already seen, right? I'm sure there's occasional differences, and occasionally it is probably a bit more handcrafted occasionally, but for the most part, from my experiences, it's literally been that. Handcrafted, cool little area to explore, surrounded by procedural crap, with a very small pool of handcrafted locations to choose from when you do get to a location in the procedural stuff. I really, really wish that the world was less segmented and isolated and had less isolation between the regions. I really wish that like the way they did it was a bit of a smaller scale. So what in my brain, what I kind of think is that like they should have maybe had like 2 to 5 solar systems, and then had, let's say, 10 to 50 planets. And I think that upper end of 50 would allow you to have some of the more barren kind of rocky ones that you can just go and explore the procedural stuff. But I mean, you can do that anywhere on any of the planets. So it's kind of like you don't need 1,000 planets to see the full scope of what you can do and have the full scope of different environments. My other problem is that, like, and this is again kind of tying in with that idea, I would have loved to see the world spaces be bigger around the cities. And I think lore-wise this makes more sense too, because why would you... I would love to see like 1 city, 2 city, 3 city, 4 cities, or like city, smaller settlement, smaller settlement, smaller settlement, wilderness in between. That whole area is handcrafted, you know? Have that... and that makes more sense lore-wise, I think, because like why would you settle and have like one city and then a few outposts and then instantly be like, all right, we're going to go to another system and colonize another planet? Like in my brain, that just doesn't really... like I feel like it would be more natural for them to kind of have expanded out more on the one planet and then expand to another, which also aligns better with the smaller scope of having like less solar systems and less planets to go on, right? But imagine how much cooler it would be if it was like, you know, here's the New Atlantis, and then you can wander out into some handcrafted wilderness, and there are handcrafted dungeons that are unique to this location, and then there's like another small settlement and another small settlement. So kind of like a mini Skyrim within the game. Like it doesn't have to be on the same scale as Skyrim, right? But just something more interesting to go out and look at, because that's the other problem in this game. There is no like, or at least from what I've seen, there's like no handcrafted wilderness, you know? There's no like awesome forests to explore with like great stuff going on. It's all just the procedural... yeah, it's all just that basic, simple procedural stuff that after the initial spectacle does get very, very repetitive. But I mean, honestly, it would have been... I think it would have worked better. Have the city, the settlements, and then maybe down on this other continent or whatever, or this other part of the planet, you've got another city. So maybe you have like 2 or 3 major cities per planet with like 3 or 4 settlements each with connected wilderness areas between, with handcrafted dungeons, basically, like handcrafted areas to go and explore between that are all kind of unique. Even if you've got a bit of repetition of tile sets and stuff like there was in Skyrim and that, at least the locations would be more unique than finding the exact same layout, the exact same thing with the exact same spawns across multiple planets, you know? And I really think the game would have worked better with that as their kind of design philosophy. And then that would have been much, much better in terms of like feeling like you're exploring somewhere, because imagine how cool it would feel if you could, like, instead of just being in this local little area and then as soon as you look beyond the edges, you just see the procedural stuff again. Imagine how cool it would be if you could like wander out. I might just like quickly do this to show you what I'm getting at. If I go... so like imagine how cool this would be, right? Instead of like, because this is the exact problem in Skyrim, right? Like I was sort of talking about earlier, you feel like you're getting out there and explore. Like you can just wander around and explore random caves and dive into random things and do random shit. In this, it's kind of like, yes, there's all this awesome handcrafted content, but it's all segmented and disconnected. And as soon as you wander out of the handcrafted area, you're back into this. Just the same rocks, the same trees, just maybe a little tiny area, which you probably will have seen before, you know? And then it's very, very quickly, it's just, it would have been so much better if, you know, imagine this, you've got the city, and then like you've got handcrafted area all around this, maybe like double or triple the actual area that you can wander, because I think you can only wander like 3 or 4k away from the actual like place that you are, like where your ship is. But basically imagine how much fucking cooler it would have been if there was like, you know, handcrafted all the way out here, you know, different, like, instead of all of these locations just being like the same little pool of stuff, it's all like a unique handcrafted thing. And then maybe there's like a little settlement over here, and see, clearly you can see like there's no way you can even wander this far, because you can already see where the limit of the bounds is of what they've put in, right? But imagine how much cooler it would be if there was like, yeah, you know, a settlement here and then another patch of like wilderness to explore for like a few kilometers or whatever, maybe even, yeah, and then like another little settlement, and then that same kind of thing just spread across like 2 or 3 times on the same planet. So you've got all this handcrafted stuff to go and look at, and then maybe do that on like 5 or 6 different planets, or like 10 different planets, you know, and then mix in some procedural stuff where you can go and just land on some random spot. But yeah, basically that's sort of the point I'm making with this video. Like the game could have been a lot cooler in that sense of exploring and doing stuff. As it stands, it's still, you know, it's still a fun game to go and find the quests from the mission givers and stuff, and like just engage with the characters and story. I think that's a body from an earlier attack thing. That's interesting. Why not?
Well,
I'll take that. But yeah, like it actually, like, engaging, like I said, that's where the game shines. Like going through the handcrafted stuff, finding the handcrafted stories and characters that have interesting things to say and send you on fun little missions and stuff. That stuff's all great, but it just could have sat so much better and felt like a much more connected and interesting world if it did have that smaller scope and those more expanded areas around it. And I think that would have just been much more immersive and, in my opinion, made the game like a lot better. But basically that's just the ramble I wanted to go on and the stuff I wanted to say. Hopefully my points came across. I know I probably got a bit rambly in places, but yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you to the legends supporting me on Patreon. I could not be doing this sort of thing without you guys, and I do really appreciate the support. Have a good day or night, whichever it may be. I will see you in the next video, and I hope you guys are enjoying Starfield as well, because I know even with all that stuff I've said, I still am quite enjoying the game, and I do have a lot of fun with that cycle I talked about of the handcrafted, mixing in a little bit of procedural, kind of dabbling in a few different systems, bit of ship building, bit of ship combat, back to another mission. All of that feels really good, and I'm very, very excited for mods. Cannot wait to see what mods people come up with, because that's the other thing. This game is a great foundation for modding. So maybe we'll see some of the stuff I talked about in this video. Maybe we'll see some of that one day. But yeah, peace, guys.